The ash still drifted through the air like snow, grey flakes that settled gently on broken stone and burned corpses. King's Landing no longer breathed. It choked. Its streets reeked of blood, smoke, and silence. The Red Keep stood scarred but upright, its great throne room open like a wound. Jon Snow walked slowly through its ruined halls, his boots crunching against charred bones. Ghost was gone. Arya had warned him. Tyrion had begged him. But his heart warred with itself, torn between the face of a woman he once believed in and the horror left in her wake. And there she stood, Daenerys, dressed in dark leather, scorched at the seams, her silver braid wild from battle. Her eyes glowed, not with madness, but with conviction. She looked over her shoulder as he approached, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "You came," she said softly, stepping down from the melted remnants of the Iron Throne. Jon didn't speak. His hand rested on the hilt of his sword, not out of threat but uncertainty. Her presence pulled at him, that same gravity she had always commanded. She looked ethereal in the falling ash, like a goddess reborn from the flames. "They don't understand," she whispered, as if still hearing the voices of the dying. "But you do." He took a breath, his voice low. "You burned children in the streets, Daenerys." "I liberated them," she said sharply. "From Cersei, from fear, from chains." Jon's fingers tightened around his sword. Her words were like ice laced with fire. She believed them. That was the terrifying part. Not that she lied, but that she truly saw herself as the hero in this massacre. "They were innocents," he muttered. "No one is innocent," she answered, stepping closer. "Not in this world. Not even you." Jon looked into her eyes and saw no hesitation, no regret, only a flicker of warmth when she reached out and placed her hand on his chest. "I need you with me," she said, voice trembling now. "We'll break the wheel together. You the last Targaryen. You were born for this." He should have done it then. One motion, one strike, end it before history repeated itself. But he didn't. He closed his eyes and pulled her into a trembling embrace. "I love you," he whispered. Daenerys shuddered against him, her arms folding tightly around his body. "Then stand by me. Help me build a new world." Jon said nothing. The sword remained in its sheath. Outside, Drogon let out a deep, rumbling roar, as if he sensed the moment had passed. Word of her survival spread quickly. By the time Arya returned to the gates, Daenerys had declared herself Queen of the Seven Kingdoms, protector of the realm, and the sole heir of House Targaryen. Jon stood beside her, silent and grim, his expression unreadable. Tyrion was dragged, in chains before the Queen. "You let her live?" he hissed at Jon, blood caked at his temple. "You fool! You blind, bloody—" "Enough!" Jon growled, not looking at him. Tyrion turned to Daenerys. "Do you hear it? That's the sound of your reign already cracking." She didn't flinch. "Let the world tremble. It must be rebuilt." Arya stood on the steps, eyes burning with rage as she realized the truth. Jon had chosen her. "Do you know what you've done?" she whispered. Jon didn't answer, because he did know. He just didn't know how to stop it anymore. In the days that followed Daenerys' crowning, King's Landing transformed from a broken city into a fortress of fear. Her unsullied patrolled every street corner, their faces blank, spears ready. The Dothraki roamed freely, unchecked and arrogant, claiming food, shelter, and women under the banner of the Dragon Queen. No one dared speak against her. Not after the last few who did were publicly executed in the square where the Sept once stood. Jon Snow kept to the Red Keep. He stood by her side at official ceremonies, his face cold and silent like winter in the north. But at night, he stared from the tower windows, watching smoke rise in the distance as more villages were punished for disloyalty. Daenerys never asked what troubled him. She believed in what they were building together. To her, he was her strength, her king in all but name. But to Jon, every day began with regret and ended with guilt. He had stayed his hand in the name of love, but love no longer warmed him. It felt like he had betrayed everything the North fought for. He had no place now, not truly, not in her new world, not among the people who looked at him with hatred and confusion, not even among the ashes of the past. And in the shadows, rebellion began to stir. Arya Stark vanished from the Red Keep. The same night Daenerys declared her new laws, loyalty pledges for every lord and lady, death for any who defied her vision of peace. No trial, no mercy, only fire. No one knew where Arya went, but rumors flew of a faceless shadow slipping through castles, whispering in ears, stoking fear, of northern banners being raised in secret, of Lord Gendry refusing to bend the knee, of Sansa Stark sending ravens that never returned. "She's planning something," Grey Worm warned Daenerys, watching her as she walked the shattered throne room again. "The North will not stay silent." "Then the North will burn," Daenerys said flatly. Jon heard her. He stepped forward. "They're not your enemies. They're scared." "They should be," she snapped, eyes flashing. "Fear is how we stop them from repeating the past." "And love?" he asked quietly. She turned slowly to him. "Wasn't that what made you hesitate?" Her words hung in the air like poison. In Winterfell, Sansa sat in the great hall, eyes cold as stone, reading another report. Daenerys had demanded 500 northern soldiers as tribute for the peacekeeping force. It was a forced conscription, a threat, a reminder of power. "She has Jon," Brienne said softly. "He's not Jon anymore," Sansa answered. "He's her shadow. He might still help us." Sansa looked up. "He's the reason she's still alive." They both knew what that meant, but they weren't the only ones who refused to kneel. Across Westeros, banners fell one by one. Dawn withdrew from the alliance. The Vale refused to answer her ravens. Riverrun rebelled. And in the Riverlands, a man named Davos Seaworth smuggled refugees out of the capital. The wheel was turning again. Only this time the flames followed. Tyrion sat in a cell beneath the Red Keep, alone but listening. He knew the scent of rebellion when it was in the air, and he knew what Daenerys would do next. She was no longer playing politics, she was playing God. When Jon visited him one night, he stood silently outside the bars. Tyrion looked up, weary but sharp. "Come to finish what you should have started." "I didn't come to argue." "No. You came to watch everything you loved turn to ash. Again." Jon didn't flinch. "She's changing. She already changed, Jon. You were just too blind to see it." Jon's jaw tightened. "She's trying to make the world better. At what cost? How many must die for her dream to live?" Jon turned to leave, but Tyrion's voice stopped him cold. "You'll have to choose again, Jon. And next time, the realm may not survive your mercy." Meanwhile, Arya stood at the docks of Dragonstone, under the cover of night, meeting with figures wrapped in cloaks, Yara Greyjoy among them. "She thinks we'll all bow," Yara said. "She forgets what fire can't touch." Arya's voice was cold and sure. "Let her come. We'll be ready." War was coming, and this time Jon Snow might not be able to stop it. The first sparks of war lit under blackened skies. The Dragon Queen struck first. Her army, what was left of it after the siege of King's Landing, marched north with ruthless efficiency. The Unsullied didn't rest. The Dothraki didn't ask questions. At her command, they razed 3 Riverland villages suspected of harboring rebels. No trial, no mercy. Daenerys stood at the edge of the fires, watching the flames consume everything. Drogon circled above like a shadow of death, his screech echoing for miles. "Let them see what awaits defiance," she told Grey Worm. But not all were cowed. The River Lords, led by Edmure Tully, freed from the dungeons by Arya's agents, declared open rebellion. They had no dragons, no massive armies, but they had the hearts of men who'd lost their families in the capital's flames. And hearts, when hardened by grief, were dangerous things. In the north, Sansa Stark sent a raven to Daenerys. It contained 5 words: "The North is not yours." Jon read the message beside Daenerys in the throne room. Her hand trembled as she held the parchment, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she crushed the note in her fist and looked up at him. "She challenges me," Daenerys said, her voice low, almost a whisper. "She defends her people," Jon replied carefully. "She defies her queen. She defies your cruelty." The silence after that was ice thick. Daenerys turned to him, eyes glistening but sharp. "You're still hers, aren't you? Deep down, you still belong to the North." "I never stopped." Her voice broke just a little. "Then why are you still here?" "Because I thought I could help you choose another path." She stepped forward, placing her hand on his chest like she had the day he chose not to kill her. "There is no other path, not anymore." Jon pulled away. It was the first time he'd done that. In the dark of night, Jon visited Tyrion's cell again. This time he said nothing. He just sat. The silence between them was heavy. Tyrion finally broke it. "She's gone, Jon. The woman you loved is gone. What remains is fire." "I know." "Then why are you still here?" Jon stared at the wall. "Because I'm afraid the moment I leave, she'll burn the world down." Tyrion leaned forward. "Then you know what must be done." Jon's jaw clenched. "I can't kill her. I didn't say you had to, but if you won't stop her, someone will." And someone tried. A hooded assassin slipped into the Red Keep under the guise of a merchant's servant, Arya. She made it to the Queen's private chambers, blade in hand, breath slow, steady. But the door opened before she could act. Jon stood there, his face pale. Their eyes met. Neither blinked. "She has to die," Arya whispered. "I know," he said. "Then why are you stopping me?" "Because it doesn't end with her. If she dies now, the Unsullied will avenge her. The Dothraki will turn the world red. And Drogon will burn every kingdom to the ground." Arya's grip on the blade didn't loosen. "I won't let her take you down with her, Jon." Jon's voice dropped to a broken whisper. "She already has." The very next day, Daenerys ordered the banners of House Stark to be stripped from the capital. The direwolf was replaced by the 3-headed dragon. She declared Sansa Stark a traitor to the realm and sentenced her to death in absentia. Jon stood beside her as she made the proclamation. But he said nothing, and that silence, louder than any protest, spread like wildfire. Far to the east, the Iron Islands began mustering ships. In the north, Sansa prepared Winterfell's defences. Arya returned to her sister's side. Gendry rallied men in the Stormlands, refusing Daenerys's claim to the Baratheon lands. The Reach, divided and weakened, began fracturing, and in the Westerlands, a rumoured Lannister bastard started rallying sellswords under a new banner: no queen, but death. The realm was coming undone, and Jon Snow stood at the centre of it, torn between the woman he saved and the world she was destroying. The North was quiet, too quiet, not the kind of peace that comes from safety, but the kind that comes before. Blood is spilled. Snow fell lightly over Winterfell's battlements. Sansa stood at the top of the wall, cloaked in grey furs, her red hair braided tight. Below, blacksmiths worked through the night, sharpening blades and reforging old weapons. Archers trained in the yard. Food was rationed, walls reinforced. The North remembered, and it prepared. "She's coming," Arya said, stepping beside her sister. "She won't stop at banners or threats," Sansa replied. "She wants to make an example of us." Arya's face was hard. Then she'll find out the North doesn't break. But they both knew the cost of defiance. Daenerys had dragons, and this time she wouldn't hesitate. In King's Landing, Daenerys stood over a war map, her hand tracing a straight line from the capital to Winterfell. Grey Worm stood at her side, his silence a loyal vow. Jon lingered behind them, stiff, unreadable. "She's fortifying Winterfell," Daenerys said coldly. "She means to drag the entire realm into war." "She's protecting her people," Jon muttered. Daenerys turned slowly. "You still defend her." "I defend the North. The North is part of my kingdom." Jon met her eyes. "Not if it's ruled by fear." Her gaze burned. "Fear keeps peace. You knew that when you chose me. You said you'd stand by me. I said I loved you, and love means loyalty." Jon didn't answer. She stepped closer, her voice trembling. "Do you still love me, Jon?" He didn't lie, not this time. "I don't know anymore." Daenerys' face went pale. The pain flickered just long enough to twist into rage. "Then ride with me," she ordered. "Let the North see where your loyalty lies." Jon stared at the map, at Winterfell, at the home he betrayed, and for the first time since all of this began, he hesitated. 3 days later, the skies above the North roared with dragonfire. Drogon swept through the clouds, his black wings blotting out the sun. Below, Daenerys rode at the head of her army, unsullied in disciplined ranks, Dothraki galloping wildly ahead, cutting down anyone who stood in their path. Jon rode at her side, armored in black, Longclaw at his hip. The northern land stretched before them, frozen, ancient, defiant. They reached the outskirts of Winterfell by dusk. Smoke already curled from the distant watchtowers. No messengers were sent. No negotiations were offered. This was war. Sansa watched from the ramparts as the dragons circled overhead. The people were already in the crypts. Women, children, elders, everyone else was armed. Arya stood beside her, dagger in hand. "We hold the line. We buy time," Sansa corrected. "For the others, for the realm." "What if no one comes?" Sansa's eyes narrowed. "Then we die on our feet." The first assault was brutal. The Unsullied advanced in perfect formation, shields raised, spears like iron thorns. The North met them with flaming arrows and boiling oil, forcing them to slow, but not break. Dothraki rode through the flanks, clashing with Northern. Cavalry in blood-soaked fields. Screams echoed through the night. Jon fought beside Daenerys, but his strikes were hesitant, unfocused. He knocked men down, but he spared lives where he could. His face was pale with horror. Every blow reminded him he was not defending peace. He was destroying his own people, and then Drogon descended. He bathed the outer wall in fire. Stone cracked, wood shattered, men screamed. Jon watched, paralyzed. Daenerys whispered to the beast, voice shaking with fury, "Burn the gate!" "Stop!" Jon shouted. She didn't. Drogon roared again, and the gate exploded in a ball of flame. Jon stared at the bodies, at the ashes, and he knew he had waited too long. Inside the keep, Arya rushed through smoke and rubble, rallying defenders. In the courtyard, Brienne of Tarth fought like a lion, holding the line as long as she could. Gendry, wounded, dragged a young boy to safety. Sansa refused to flee, but Arya pulled her anyway, shoving her toward the crypts. "We need to live," Arya hissed. "We need to survive this." Sansa didn't argue. She only looked back once, as the walls of her childhood home collapsed behind her. Jon stood among the fires of the Godswood, Longclaw in hand, blood on his armor, smoke in his lungs. And across from him, on the scorched ground where the heart tree once stood, Daenerys stood alone. She looked at him, tears on her cheeks, smoke in her hair. "Do you see it now?" she asked. "This is what it takes to build a better world." Jon's heart broke. He saw it, and he knew he had no more time to run from it. The godswood burned behind them. Jon stood still, longclaw in hand, surrounded by the smoke of a shattered home. The air reeked of death, and the snow beneath his feet was black with soot. Across from him, Daenerys breathed heavily, her silver braid loose, ash streaking her face like war paint. Her eyes never left his. Eyes that once held warmth, now fire. "This was the only way," she said, her voice soft but unshaken. Jon didn't answer. He couldn't. "You've seen what mercy brings, Jon, Cersei, the slavers of Meereen, the lords who kneel and lie. Mercy is weakness. Fire brings truth." Jon's throat was dry. "You think this is truth?" She stepped forward, her voice breaking. "I did this for them. For a world where no one else would be enslaved, where no child would live in fear. I did it for us." Jon looked around at the broken branches, the charred corpses, the fallen banners of House Stark. "This isn't us." Daenerys' hands trembled at her sides. "You said you loved me." "I did. Then prove it." Arya moved like a ghost through the chaos, slipping between flaming timbers and fallen stones. Her eyes searched for Jon, for Daenerys. The city was lost. Winterfell had fallen. But the war wasn't over. Not yet. In the crypts, Sansa held the children close, her voice steady even as tremors shook the stone ceiling above. She had sent ravens before the siege. Last desperate. Messages to the Vale, the Riverlands, even the Iron Islands. No reply had come. She feared none would. But then the horns blew. Not one. 3. Outside Winterfell, the tides of war shifted. A new force charged from the east, a fresh army bearing the golden banners of House Arryn. Behind them came men of the Riverlands, screaming Tully war cries. Ships docked at White Harbour, offloaded. Iron-born warriors. Gendry's men regrouped, rejoined the fight, and at their head, Bran Stark, wheeled into battle like a strange omen of fate. His presence emboldened the defenders. Drogon rose into the skies to meet this threat. But volleys of ballista bolts from ships in the harbour clipped his wings, forcing him back. The battlefield erupted again, this time not in submission, but resistance. Jon heard the horns. So, did Daenerys? Her face twisted. More blood, more war. When will they learn? "When you stop giving them reasons to fight," Jon said quietly. "They fight because they fear the future I offer." "No," he said, stepping forward, eyes pained but resolute. "They fight because they remember what freedom feels like." Daenerys' voice dropped to a whisper. "And you?" Jon met her eyes. "I remember who I am." Her breath hitched. "Don't leave me. I never should have stayed." Daenerys stepped closer, placing her hand over his heart again, like the first time, in that ruined throne room. But Jon didn't pull her in. He stepped back. "You said you were going to break the wheel," he said. "You became it." Tears streaked her face. She shook her head. "Then kill me, like everyone else. Prove I was right." Jon raised his sword, then dropped it. "No," he said. "I won't be your executioner or your protector. I'm done choosing for the realm." He turned and walked away, leaving her alone with fire in her veins and nothing left to burn. The retreat was chaotic. Arya found him just beyond the gates, his face bloody, his armor scorched. She didn't speak. She just walked beside him, and together they slipped through the lines as the tide turned. Behind them, Daenerys screamed into the sky, summoning. Drogon again, but the beast didn't come. He circled above, unsure. His wings were wounded, his rage misdirected, and the men on the ground rallied, not in fear, but in fury. The Battle of Winterfell ended not in victory, but in exile. Daenerys fled with what remained of her unsullied. Drogon carried her west, out of reach, out of sight. Some say she wept, some say she vowed vengeance, but none knew where she went. Jon, Arya, and Sansa stood among the ruins of their home, surrounded by the dead. Winterfell was half destroyed. The price was too high. Bran, ever still, ever distant, said one thing: "It's not over." And Jon knew he was right. The wind howled over the cliffs of old Valyria. No ship sailed near it anymore, not since the Doom. Its blackened ruins were cursed, they said, a graveyard for dragons and empires alike. But now, for the first time in centuries, smoke rose from the ancient stones, and in its heart, beneath jagged towers and molten rock, a dragon rested, and Daenerys Targaryen stood beside him. Drogon's wings had begun to heal, slowly, painfully. His scales gleamed again in the firelight, and his breath smoked with barely contained fury. Daenerys stroked his side with trembling fingers, her eyes hollow. "Westeros has turned its back," she whispered. "Even Jon." She didn't cry anymore. The tears had dried weeks ago. What lived in her now wasn't grief, it was clarity. She wasn't born to be loved. She was born to rule. And next time she would return, not as a queen, as a conqueror. In the north, snow fell again. Thick, clean, quiet. It was as if Winterfell itself was trying to bury the war beneath a fresh sheet of white. Jon sat alone by the broken godswood where the heart tree had once stood. Only scorched roots remained now. He stared at them in silence, his hands wrapped in bandages, his soul heavier than any wound. Arya found him there. "You still think sparing her was the right thing?" she asked, kneeling beside him. Jon didn't answer. "She'll come back. You know that." "I know." Arya's voice dropped. "And what will you do then?" He looked at her, and for once his voice was steady. "I'll stop running." The new council formed slowly. Sansa, hailed as queen in the north, refused all titles beyond what her people granted her. Gendry, scarred but alive, held Storm's End. Yara Greyjoy returned to Pike and closed its harbours, declaring the Iron Islands neutral. Edmure Tully, with Arya's help, stabilized the Riverlands. Bran remained. Bran, he said little, offered no claim to thrones or crowns, but people listened when he spoke. Something in his voice, ancient, heavy, gave him strange authority. And when the question came, who would rule Westeros now? It was Jon's name, some dared whisper. But Jon refused. "I've seen what the throne does to people," he told Sansa. "I won't sit on it." Sansa's eyes narrowed. "Someone has to. Then let the people choose. Lords, ladies, let them decide. Not fire, not blood, not birthright." "And what about her?" Sansa asked. "What if she returns before they decide?" Jon looked toward the horizon. "Then I'll face her." And across the sea, Daenerys gathered those who remained loyal. Not many, but enough. Old Targaryen bannermen, exiled sellswords, a handful of Dothraki who followed her into shadow without question. She trained them in fire and blood, taught them to fear nothing, to believe in her as a prophet of a new world. And when she stood before them, eyes burning, voice sharp as dragon steel, she said, "I gave Westeros mercy once. I will not give it again." Back in Westeros, whispers of her survival spread like wildfire. Sailors claimed they saw Drogon in the distance. A trader spoke of Valyria glowing at night. Refugees in the east talked of a silver-haired woman who could not be killed by fire. And everywhere Jon went, he saw it, the fear, not of Daenerys herself, but of what he might do if she came back. Would he fight her? Would he stand with her? Would he fall again? Tyrion visited him one cold evening, limping slightly but alive. He'd been working with Bran, advising a slow, fragile unification of the kingdoms without a throne. He looked at Jon and said simply, "She's preparing for war." Jon didn't look surprised. "Then so must we," he said. Tyrion's brow furrowed. "You sound like her." Jon turned, eyes haunted. "No, I sound like someone who's finally ready to end what I should have ended long ago." The sky split open above Blackwater Bay, not with thunder, with wings. Drogon soared through the clouds, larger than before, scarred, angrier, awakened. His roar sent birds scattering, his shadow falling like a curse upon the capital, and beneath him, from ships flying black sails and red dragon sigils, Daenerys returned to Westeros. But this time, there were no speeches, no parades, no promises. Of freedom, only fire. Her first strike was swift and brutal. The remains of the Lannister fleet docked at the capital were turned to cinders before sunrise. The outer walls were shattered by flame. No warning, no negotiation. By noon, King's Landing had fallen again. Only now there was no Iron Throne to take. Daenerys stood in the smouldering ruins of the Great Hall, her boots crunching against. The same ash and bone she had once walked before. The melted throne was still gone, but her claim was not. She raised her voice to the wind. "The realm has forgotten who I am. Let fire remind them." Far to the north, Jon Snow stood atop the battlements of Winterfell, watching the smoke rise on the southern horizon. "She's back," Arya said beside him. He didn't need her to say it. He felt it like a cold pit in his stomach. The last time he saw that smoke, it came from his mercy. And this time, there would be no second chances. "People are scared." "Jon," Arya continued, "they're looking to you." "I'm not a king." "You're something worse," she said quietly. "You're hope." The council reconvened in Riverrun. Every major house sent someone, reluctantly. Fear stitched them together now, not loyalty. Queen Sansa sat at the head. Gendry flanked her, grim and angry. Yara arrived late, armored, and blunt. Even Samwell Tarly stood among them, scrolls in hand, trying to find a path through fire. And Jon Snow, he stood in the back, saying little, until Sansa turned to him. "What do we do, Jon?" All eyes fell on him. He didn't flinch. "We stand together, or she burns us one by one." Tyrion nodded. "She doesn't want the throne. She wants obedience. She wants everyone to kneel, not just in body, in spirit." "We don't kneel," Gendry said. "Then we prepare to die," Yara replied. Jon stepped forward. "We don't win this with swords alone. We can't kill a dragon, not in the open." Bran, who had said nothing for hours, finally spoke. "There is a place," he said softly, "in the Vale, where dragons once roosted. A canyon of echo and stone. A trap if you know how to lure the beast." Jon met his gaze. "Would Drogon follow her?" "He would follow her into death." Jon nodded slowly. "Then that's what we give them." Arya rode south ahead. Of the main force, her mission was simple: find Daenerys, confirm her strength and report back. What she found in King's Landing shook her more than the fire ever had. The city was silent, not from death, but obedience. Daenerys didn't rule it. She possessed it. The people walked with eyes down, silent, reverent, terrified. The Unsullied were fewer, but they patrolled like gods. And Daenerys sat not on a throne, but at the center of the Red Keep, surrounded by flame, followers, and fanatics. She had become more than queen. She was becoming a myth, a living legend of fire. Jon marched south with the combined forces of the North, the Riverlands, Storm's End, and the Vale. Not an army of millions, not even thousands, but what they had was united by something Daenerys had long abandoned: choice. And with Bran's knowledge of old dragon roads, they laid their trap. A narrow gorge in the Vale, where sound echoed endlessly and walls of stone rose like prison bars. Hidden ballistas lined the cliffs. Dozens, maybe enough. And Arya's message had arrived in time. She's leaving King's Landing tomorrow. She's flying north. She's coming for you. Jon stood alone in the canyon's center, sword drawn, wind howling. He wasn't hiding. He was waiting. And as the roar shook the sky, he looked up. Drogon was descending, and Daenerys was riding him. Not armored, not cloaked. She wore red silk. Her hair was loose, her face unreadable. She landed hard, Drogon screaming as his wings crashed down like thunder. She dismounted slowly and walked toward Jon without fear. The wind in the canyon was sharp and cold, slicing through the air as if the very land held its breath. Jon Snow stood motionless at the bottom, his hand resting on the hilt of Longclaw. His eyes never left her, not the dragon, not the fire, just her, Daenerys. She moved toward him slowly, her steps light, almost regal. No guards, no unsullied, no army, just Drogon watching from behind, massive and restless, smoke curling from his nostrils as if he sensed what was coming. Jon's voice broke the silence. "You don't have to do this." Daenerys stopped a few paces from him, her silver hair whipping around her face. "I didn't come to fight," she said softly. Jon didn't relax. "Then why are you here?" Her gaze flicked to the cliffs. "You set a trap." He nodded. "No point in lying now. And you came anyway." "I had to see you," she whispered. "One last time." For a moment it was just them again. No war, no throne, no betrayal. Just Jon and Daenerys, standing where the world could never hear what passed between them. "You lied to me," she said, her voice quivering like a crack in glass. "You said you'd stand by me." "You lied first," Jon replied. "You said you'd build a better world, but all you built was a pyre. I gave them everything, and they feared me for it. They feared you because you stopped listening. You stopped feeling." Her eyes flashed with fury. "I felt everything, and it broke me." Jon stepped forward. "You still have a choice. End this, leave this war behind. And go where? Hide? Grow old in exile while they rebuild the world I died to change? You didn't die." Daenerys' lips trembled. "Maybe I should have." Up on the cliffs, Gendry's men held the ballistas steady. Arya crouched beside one, her fingers on the release trigger, her eyes locked on Jon's back. "Hold," she whispered to the crew. "Not yet." Below, Daenerys reached for Jon's hand. He didn't pull away. Her fingers were cold. She was shaking. "You still love me," she said. "I'll always love you," he answered. "Then come with me." Jon looked up at Drogon, who lowered his head, watching him with ancient, burning eyes. Jon shook his head slowly. "I can't follow you. I can't be a part of this." Daenerys' eyes filled with tears, but she didn't fall apart. She had no tears left for breaking. "I won't stop." "I know." And then she stepped back. "Then neither will I," she said. Her voice was a blade. She turned toward Drogon and raised her hand. Arya whispered, "Now." The ballistas fired. 3 iron bolts sliced through the air. 2 missed, but the third struck Drogon's wing. He let out a deafening roar and reared up in agony. The ground shook. Fire shot into the sky, lighting the canyon in gold. Daenerys screamed. "No!" Jon shouted. "Stop! Stop!" More bolts fired. Drogon struggled into the air, wounded but not grounded. He circled madly, shrieking, unleashing fire at the canyon walls as chaos broke loose above. Jon rushed to Daenerys, grabbing her arm. "You have to leave. They'll kill you." "You brought them here," she screamed. "I wanted to stop the war, not you." "I am the war," she shouted. And in that instant, her eyes were wild again, like in King's Landing, like when the bells rang and she didn't. Drogon swooped low, and Jon pulled her close, shielding her from the falling rocks. The beast bellowed, flames spiraling into the sky, but the next volley hit him again, this time in the side. Drogon crashed to the ground with a scream that shook every soul watching. Daenerys ran to him, sobbing, blood on her hands as she touched his scales. "No, no, stay with me," she whispered. Jon followed, slowly, carefully, his sword still at his side. "He's dying," she cried, looking up at Jon. "They killed him. Your people." "No," Jon said quietly. "You did. You made them afraid." She rose, shaking. "Then they'll fear me more." And that's when Jon knew there would be no end, not while she lived, not for them, not for anyone. She reached for Drogon's reins, and Jon stepped forward. "I'm sorry," he whispered. And this time he didn't hesitate. Longclaw plunged into her side between the ribs, quick and clean. Daenerys gasped, her eyes wide, blood blooming across the red silk like a final fire. She clutched him as she fell. "You said you wouldn't—" "I know," Jon whispered, voice cracking. "I'm sorry." Drogon let out a sound no one had ever heard before. A mourning roar so deep the mountains wept. He rose, his wings tattered, and stared at Jon with burning, endless grief. He did not kill him. He did not attack. Instead, he gathered Daenerys's body in his claws, rose into the air with one last thunderous scream, and vanished into the storm clouds. The war ended that day. There were no songs, no celebrations, only silence. Jon Snow turned himself in to the council. He refused titles, refused freedom. He was sentenced to exile, this time for real. Not to the Night's Watch, but beyond. Beyond the wall. He left without a word, riding north with Ghost at his side. Arya watched him go. Sansa wept quietly, and Bran, now chosen as king in a realm without thrones, simply nodded, as if he had seen it all before. Years later, some say they saw a dragon flying over the shivering sea, cradling a silver-haired woman in its claws. Some say she still breathes. Some say Jon never looked back. But everyone remembers the man who loved a queen, and the queen who loved a flame more than a crown, and how love nearly destroyed a world.